Hi everyone, welcome back to Tuckaway Pines. I'm down here in my little preservation station. Today I wanted to bring you guys along with me to preserve these apples. I unfortunately couldn't bring you along to pick them because of our unpredictable Wisconsin weather we've been having, especially in October. It's been really interesting so far this month. So anyway, instead of bringing you with to pick them, I'll bring you along with me to preserve them. So today we will be doing a couple different recipes to preserve these apples in a couple different ways, and I'll show you each way. And yeah, I hope you're ready and I hope you enjoy. So we'll be doing 3 different recipes today: apple cider, applesauce, and apple pie filling. The applesauce and apple cider are personal recipes of mine. I actually have them in my little recipe box. I keep personal recipes in the box, so maybe, a few decades from now, my grandchildren will open it up and want grandma's apple cider or grandma's applesauce or something. So those are my personal recipes, and I'll leave those in the description for you if you want to go ahead and make these yourself and share them with your family. And then the apple pie filling is actually from the book of fall home preserving recipes, so that's where this recipe is coming from. So if you don't have this book, highly recommend it. There are hundreds of amazing new recipes in here. I have tons of that are on my to-do list that I have yet to make, so highly recommend that, and I'll leave this in the description as well. But that's where all my recipes are coming from today, and let's begin. Alrighty, so today we're going to be making 3 different recipes with these apples, and we're going to be canning them all at the end. And the two types of apples that I have are Macoun and Spartan apples. We got these at our local orchard, not that far from here actually, and yeah, I actually took the liberty of weighing out my apples here into 3 different bowls, so it's all even and ready to go. It's about 22 apples per bowl. I had about 17 pounds left because some apples went to fresh eating, but I initially started with 20 pounds, had 17, so now I have measured everything out. About 22 apples if you want to count it that way. So because oddly, per bowl, I had measured out 5 pounds in each bowl, and then that was 19 apples, and then I just kind of divided the rest of the apples amongst the bowls. So 22 apples there, and we're going to start with some apple cider. That'll be our first recipe we'll begin with, and with these recipes, I'll also leave that in the description as well, so you can always reference that if you wish to make your own. Alright, we'll get ready for apple cider. Okay, the first recipe is apple cider we're going to start with today, and it's honestly pretty straightforward. It's very flexible as a recipe, so you can kind of add as much or as little of anything. You can take something out, substitute for something else, so it's based off of your taste. So it'll be really easy and pretty straightforward. The things that I have here today that I'll be using, obviously my apples, and then I have some oranges as well. Any orange is fine. You could even do like a tangerine. I've heard lemon, even grapefruit, just to get that different citrusy note, in your cider. I have a couple coffee filters because I'm going to be making some spice bags, and we'll do that and I'll show you how to do that as well. And then I even have some tea strainers that I'll put my spice bakes in, and then just kind of have them soak into my little brew that we'll have going. And I also have obviously a large stock pot. You'll need that because of the amount of apples and such, and we'll have to fill that with a lot of water as well. And then I have a bunch of seasonings such as cinnamon, cloves, allspice, and nutmeg, just some very warming seasonal spices. Feel free to kind of alternate or adjust the spices as you prefer. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And then you can also add any sweeteners like honey, maple syrup, some sugar, if you need to sweeten it up. But I prefer to do that towards the end because the apples, the oranges, and just the other spices really do blend well, and you don't want it too sweet. So, okay. All right, to begin, we're gonna start cutting our apples. And you don't have to cut them any sort of way. You don't have to peel them. You don't even have to core them necessarily. You're just trying to get, I guess, the flavoring and the juices out of the apple. So we're gonna go ahead and just kind of, I'm gonna quarter them. So I'm gonna cut your apples and put them in your pot, and yeah. The same goes for your oranges as well. Once we get to there, you can cut your oranges. You don't even have to peel those as well. Honestly, I might, because I like to save the orange peels and dehydrate them and use them for tea and stuff. And potpourri, actually, this time of year, it's a good time to make potpourri. So save your peels and your apple peels and your orange peels for that. Or tea. But this recipe also does take some time. That's why we are going to start this first. And then while this is going, we're going to work on our other two recipes. Because you want this to kind of simmer and steep on the stovetop for 2 hours or so. It's kind of like making an apple tea. So I'm going to finish chopping all the stuff up, and I will see you when I'm done. Okay, so I have all my apples chopped up. I even I sliced up about 3 oranges. I even saved my peels, like I said. I'm gonna set those off to the side. I'll deal with those later. But yes, I have my big stock pot full of my apples and oranges. I even went ahead and kind of squeezed the oranges too, just to release some of the juices. And now I'm gonna be making my little spice bags, and I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so I want to show you how I make my spice bags. I have 2 coffee filters, in case you don't have anything else on hand. Coffee filters work perfect. The spices I'm going to be using today are cinnamon, ground allspice, and then ground cloves, and then some granulated salt. The reason why I'm doing this spice bag is because all my spices are ground. If you were to have whole cloves and cinnamon sticks, you are more than welcome to just throw them in the pot as they are, and then just sift them out after, towards the end, when you go to strain everything. But since, like I said, I'm using everything ground, I'm going to put it all in a bag, so that way it's easy to contain, and I can just pull it out when I need it out. So, with all that being said, I'm going to take my coffee filter, and then I'm going to take my cinnamon. I'm going to do, let's see here, 2 tablespoons of cinnamon. Seems fair, right? So another thing I said earlier was this apple cider recipe is very flexible. So you can kind of go by taste, what you like, what your family likes. And based on the batch, you know, you might be making a smaller batch than I am. So you might need less seasonings. And then my next spice, I'm going to do 2 teaspoons of allspice. And just dab that in there. There we go. And then we're gonna go with a tablespoon of ground cloves. Nope. A little shy, but that's okay. That should be enough. Ground cloves gives it a good punch. And then finally, because to offset that sweetness, I'm gonna use some pink Himalayan salt. And I'm just going to throw in just a pinch. Nothing too crazy. There we go. And then next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this up. Oh, I just realized I have 2 filters here. You could double up if you want, but that might prevent your spices from flavoring. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of coil it up like so. And I'm going to take some kitchen twine. Kitchen twine and just tie that up. Now you can make it longer so you can have it dangle out of your pot, but I'll show you what I'm gonna do next. So just tie that way it doesn't come undone while it's simmering in your liquid, because that would be unfortunate. It wouldn't make it bad. It would just, you would have a lot of that fine seasoning in the bottom. So now I have a tea strainer, a large one at that, and I'm going to put my spice bag in it, put it in my strainer, and it has this hook so I can just have it dangle in my pot, just like so. And I'm going to make one more just like this, the same way, and we'll move on to putting water in our pot. Okay, so now that I have both of my spice bags ready and my pot is filled with my apples and oranges, I'm going to fasten my bags inside my pot like so. And I'm going to just kind of hook the little hook around the handle so it doesn't float away from me. I'm going to do the same with this one on the other side so it's kind of even. Catch it doesn't float away. And now what I'm going to do is fill this up with water completely up, probably about to the bolts of the handles. You want maybe about 2-3 inches of space. No boiling over, anything crazy like that, but you want everything to be covered. And then we're going to put this on our stove and we're going to put it onto a medium to low. And then once it starts to simmer, turn it down to low and then just kind of keep it warm and let it kind of, you know, marinate, if you will, and steep. And then over time, you want to stir it occasionally. And then after about 2 hours, we'll come back to it. We'll mash it up a little bit just to kind of get those spices and those or the juices and stuff out even more. And we'll kind of let it continue to simmer for about 30 minutes to another hour. And then at that point, we'll come back and we'll strain everything out and then we'll process it. But I'll show you that as we'll go. I'm just kind of giving you a rundown. So right now I'm going to go fill this up and put it on my stove and let it simmer for a while. And then we'll come back down here and start our next recipe while that's doing that. So, all right, I'll be right back. Okay, so the next recipe we're going to be starting is applesauce. Before we begin, I do want to apologize for the sound quality right now in the basement. This is a working basement, so it's not very soundproof or anything like that. So please don't mind my washer and dryer over there. Try and ignore that while we do this over here. But to get back to it, applesauce. I have my apples. So we got that. I have an extra bowl here off to the side. I'm going to be saving my peels and my apple cores for a little bonus recipe at the end. So if you stick around, I will kind of let you in on a little bonus recipe. So that'll be fun. Next, I have my pot that I'm going to be cooking my apples down in. And then I have my peeler, my knife, you know, for chopping, peeling. I even have a melon baller to pop the cores out. So I have a measuring cup because you will need some water for the apples when you cook them down. The spices I'm going to be using are cinnamon, ground cloves, and some salt. And then my sweeteners today I'm going to be using are honey. You could also use maple syrup, any type of sugar, brown sugar, regular sugar. And yeah, so we're going to begin. First step is to start peeling and coring these apples. So if you have an extra pair of hands, get them ready because that will make it go so much faster. It's a long process. So I'm going to begin peeling my apples. And like I said, I'm going to keep my peels and my cores off to the side for that extra bonus recipe. So stick around for that. So a little tip from preventing your apples from browning as you are chopping them, because it is time consuming, I'm not gonna lie, is to have a lemon or some lemon juice. I have some lemon juice here from the store, but I also bought some fresh lemons. So I'm gonna use my fresh lemons today so they don't go bad, but then also I want to save my peels so I can use that kind of like with my orange peels that I did for the apple cider. So kind of thinking ahead and being multifunctional. So once I'm done coring and chopping my apples, you know, each little batch, I'll put them in my pot, and then I'll cut my lemon in half, take a half, and then just kind of squeeze that juice over it and just stir it a little bit, and then on to my next batch. And if you're using a blender or an immersion blender, make sure you get your core out completely, because unlike the food mill, the food mill kind of strains it in a way. It gets all like any leftover seeds or any bits of apple peel that might have been left on there, what have you. It gets all that stuff out of there, so that's not in your final product. So if you don't have a food mill, I'd recommend just kind of taking the extra couple seconds and making a mess. Taking the extra couple seconds and making sure your core is completely out, because that'll just make for a better product. Okay, so I have all my apples peeled, cored, and chopped up. I even put my lemon juice all up in there. Got my peels up to the side. Same with my apple peels, so we'll get to those later. Just stick around. Next, I'm going to place in my water. Now, with my recipe here, it says about a half a cup to a cup per 3 pounds. This is about 5.5 to 6 pounds, so you just double it. I did 1.5 cups. And you can always add more water later on. I'd rather add more later than add too much now. So you just want a little bit of that. And then now you can add just some of your sweeteners, because your apples, especially these apples, I'm using a mixture of Spartan and Macoun, and these are very sweet, very juicy, sweet. They even smell sweet, like walking past a bowl of fresh apples, they just, so sweet. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of my sweeteners, and then once everything's cooked down, I'm gonna taste it, and then if I have to, I'll add more then. So here we go. I'm going to do about a tablespoon of cinnamon to start. Sprinkle that in. And then I'll probably do 2 teaspoons of cloves, ground cloves. If you use whole, just make sure you fish them out at the end. Or have them in like a spice bag of some sort. These aren't exact. I'm kind of being sloppy about it, but because applesauce is also a very flexible recipe, just like apple cider. It's all based on your taste preference. So if you like things super sweet, go for it. Sweeten it up. But if you like things like not as sweet, you know, that's where you can play around with. I'm going to add a tablespoon of sugar, white sugar. Sprinkle that in there. And then I'm going to add 2 teaspoons of brown sugar. It'll kind of give it that nice, like, just dark color, but also like, almost like a syrupy note as well. So 1, 2. Brown sugar. So, and then finally, well not finally, I can't say finally, I'm going to add some honey. And I'm just really going to eyeball it. Whatever looks good to me, right? Whatever looks like it's enough is enough. That looks good. And then for my secret ingredient, pinch of salt. It'll help off balance that sweetness, especially if maybe you have over-sweetened it. Add a little bit of salt to kind of bring it back to the savory side, if you will. And I can always add more later on. Don't forget, add more later, not now. Okay, I'm gonna just kind of mix it a little bit. And then what we're gonna do is put it on our burner. I'm sorry, it's so loud over there. But I hope you can hear me just fine. I'm trying to project. Okay, so it's all zhuzhed up enough, mixed up, and then I'm going to put it over here on my hot plate, and then we're going to bring it to a nice boil to where the apples start softening and cooking down. So while we're waiting for everything to kind of cook down and warm up a bit, we are going to move on to our next recipe, and that is the apple pie filling. Now this recipe isn't my recipe. I got it from the Ball Canning, it's the Complete Book of Home Preservation by Ball. And they have the apple pie filling recipe. You can easily get that, through the book here. I can leave it in the description as well if you are curious about it. But this recipe is more measured out than my last two, because me personally, I just kind of throw things in as I like it or as it looks. So this is going to be a little more structured. But anyway, it calls for 12 cups of apples. We're going to need some granulated sugar, clear gel. Now that is a recommended canning starch or a thickener that is approved for canning only. You can't use cornstarch or flour or anything like that to thicken up the syrup, because that's not stable to go underneath extreme amounts of heat. So they recommend clear gel. So if you don't have that, I recommend going ahead and purchasing that and holding off. I've done in the past is just not use the clear gel. So if you just have to use up your apples, they're going bad, or you need to make filling for a pie or something, and you don't have the clear gel, go ahead and follow the recipe. Just don't use the clear gel, and your syrup is going to be more liquidy. But when you do use your syrup to actually make your pie or what have you, then you can thicken it before you bake it. That makes sense. I do have clear gel. This is what I have. This is what I'm going to be using today. So I'm going to be doing it the way that the book specifies, just to follow that recipe. But like I said, if you don't have it, just follow the recipe without it, and just know that you can thicken it before you use your filling. Okay, it calls for clear gel. Then you want, obviously, your spices are a little flexible. You can add whatever your palate enjoys. This says ground cinnamon and nutmeg. You want some cold water or unsweetened apple juice, and then lemon juice. Now, with that being said, I have a bowl of water here with some freshly squeezed lemon juice in it. I'm going to use that to prevent my apples from browning when I peel, core, and chop them. And then that'll be my unsweetened apple juice. So I'm going to save some of this reserved water for when I go ahead and make the syrup for my slices. And I'll kind of break that down when we get there, but that's just kind of a little thing that I'm going to be doing a little different, is saving my apple juice lemon water. So yeah, now we're going to begin, and what we're going to do is the fun part. Get your extra pair of hands ready, because we're going to be peeling, chopping, and coring our apples once again. And like I said before in the previous recipe, if you stick around long enough, I'm going to show you a bonus recipe that includes using up your apple peels and your apple cores. So if you save them and hang around, I'll show you what you can do with them. Alrighty, so it's been about 2 hours and we are going to check our cider. Look at that. Yeah, apples nice and cooked down. Smell-o-vision, where are you? It smells delicious. Now I'm going to take my masher and just kind of mash everything in, and then we'll let it kind of steep for another 30-40 minutes or so. Alrighty, so now I finally finished chopping and peeling all my apples and coring them. I have them sliced in these cute little wedge slices, and they're sitting in my lemon water. So now I have a pot of water, just about up to a boil now, and what we're going to do is blanch our apple pie slices. We're going to blanch them in the boiling water for about a minute. We're going to pull them out, put them in a bowl just off to the side, nice and warm. Keep them covered so they stay warm. And then we will go ahead to our next step, which is making our syrup. So start blanching. Now it's important to blanch your apples for 1 minute because it not only, I guess, keeps their color and prevents them from getting all mushy and stuff, but apples have a lot of oxygen inside of them. And if you don't do this step and you were to go ahead and can it, the canning process can lead to what is called siphoning, and that's where the oxygen starts to escape from your seals, and it's a potential for seal failure because that siphoning can occur after the processing. So I do highly recommend not skipping this step because it'll increase your chances of having a successful product. Okay, our apples are all nice and blanched now, and then next we're going to make our syrup. For this recipe, it calls for 1 1/4 cup of cold water and 2 1/2 cups of unsweetened apple juice. For the cold water, I'm actually going to use the water that we blanched our apples in because it's kind of like a very diluted apple juice in a sense. So I'm going to use that. 1 1/4 cups of that, and then for the unsweetened apple juice, I'm going to substitute that with the lemon apple water that I had my apples soaking in so they wouldn't turn brown. I'm going to use that water for the 2 1/2 cups of apple juice. So I think it works well because it adds, it just elevates that flavor and it just extends that flavor. And also it just doesn't waste liquid. So instead of dumping that all away, I can at least use some of it. So we're going to do that. I'm going to take 1 1/4 cup of my hot blanching water. Ooh, that pan's hot. So we got that in there, and then I'm going to get 2 1/2 cups of my lemon apple water. See? Oh, it's okay if there's little floaties in there. That's just extra flavor. And actually, I'm going to double this. So before I get too far ahead, I'm going to double this recipe because I know I have more than 12 cups of apples, okay? So just for safety, I'm just gonna double it. So I did my 2 1/2, so I'm gonna do another 2 1/2. So that's about So that's perfect. And I'm going to grab 1 more 1.25 cups of my hot blanched apple water. Okay. I'm going to turn my heat up as if it wasn't hot enough already. Next, it calls for 2 3/4 cups of granulated sugar. Now I'm going to double that. So. Now I'm going to add a little extra something. I got some brown sugar here. I like it. It adds a nice, syrupy flavor, and it also kind of darkens it as well. So I'm just gonna add probably, I don't know, the rest of this. It's probably half a cup, honestly, so I'll just throw that in there. Now you're gonna want to add your seasonings. I'm gonna do some cinnamon, cloves, and allspice. And I think with this, I might just add the rest of it. There's really not much in here. Maybe about 2 tablespoons. So I'm just gonna add that. I think I have more, so if I need more, I can play with that. The cloves, if I can open it. Probably do a tablespoon of the clove. Now the spices, I'm just kind of going off script because it's just what I like, you know? I like to adjust the flavors, how I like it. The recipe does say cinnamon and nutmeg, so. And then for my allspice, because I'm gonna do allspice, I'm gonna probably do, actually, let's do 3 teaspoons. 1, 2, 3. Okay. Next, I'm gonna add my honey, as if it wasn't sweet enough already, right? Just gonna drizzle however much I want. Next, I'm gonna do my pinch of salt. I think it just enhances the flavor, but it also like levels out that sweetness. So it's a good chunk. Turn the heat up a bit more. Now next, we want to do our clear gel. If you are doing the clear gel, this is our next step. If you're not, you don't have to. We can just skip this part and just go on to the next step. But here, I'm going to be using my clear gel, and it says for this recipe, 3/4 cup. Now I'm going to double it. So I got all my ingredients in the pot, and I have it coming up to a boil. And you want to just stir consistently, and once your mixture comes to a boil, it'll start to thicken up, and then that is when we'll add our apples. Okay, so my apple pie filling is nice and thick. It's actually like really thick syrup, and I don't know, it might be a little too thick, but we'll see. And now we are going to fold in our apple slices finally. So take the lid off. We'll just place it right behind me. Okay, now we're going to spoon in our apples. And obviously you just kind of want to be somewhat gentle so you don't ruin your slices, so they don't get all mashed up. The instructions even say gently fold your slices into the syrup. I'm just going to dump the rest in. Okay. And then now we're going to fold it. All right, so now that our pie filling is all mixed together and done, the next step is to can it. So I'm gonna get my jars all cleaned up and ready. I'm gonna get my canner full of water and on the stove starting to simmer. I'm gonna do that upstairs though because of the space. I'm gonna kind of do my canning in waves because I have the cider still to go, and then actually my applesauce is done. We're gonna, mash that down next, but so I'm going to set this off to the side, mash down the applesauce, and then we'll get our jars ready to go, and we'll start canning then. So we are almost there, everyone. Alrighty, so I set our apple pie filling off to the side because our applesauce is finally ready. Now everything is all nice and cooked down. It's very smushy, and what I'm going to do what I'm going to do is take my potato masher here, and I'm going to just kind of mash the apples up as good as I can, and then based on the consistency that you prefer, you might like it just like that, a little chunky. You might want to put it through an immersion blender or a food mill to kind of smooth it out. And that's what I'm going to do. I have a food mill. I personally don't like the way it operates. I need to get a different one because it's very basic model. But I'm going to use my immersion blender because I feel that gives me a good result product as well. So, end result product, I should say. So we're going to do that. But first, let's mash. Really hot right now, but this is also the time to maybe do some taste testing if you can without burning yourself. And then add any sort of sweeteners, any more spices that you need. You know, adjust it. So I got it pretty mashed up, the larger chunks that I can with my hand. So what I'm going to do is take my immersion blender just for a few seconds, maybe a minute at most, and just kind of smooth it out a bit. And there we go. It looks pretty good. All I have to do is just taste it. Okay, so all I needed to add was just a little more cinnamon and some cloves. Just mix it all together. So it just needed a little more kick to it. Perfect. That's awesome. And it'll taste better when it's cooled down too, because typically, I don't know about you, but I only eat applesauce cold. So when it cools down and all that, it'll really kind of enhance that flavor. So my applesauce is at the preferred consistency for me. My apple pie filling is all good and mixed. So what I'm going to do is take these upstairs, put them all into my canning jars that I have all ready to go right now, and wait for my canner to start boiling because I have that on the stove upstairs as well. It's starting to simmer right now, so I'm just gonna load up all my jars and we're gonna start canning away. So let's go upstairs. So we got about 5 3/4 of a pint. I'm just gonna can these 4 and I'm gonna throw the other one in the fridge right away. But before I put my lids on, I'm gonna wipe down my rims with some vinegar to ensure that everything's clean and that the lids seal properly. Once your water comes to a full boil, you can place your jars inside and then begin your processing time. For applesauce, it's going to take 20 minutes plus the time of your altitude. So for me, it'll be 25 minutes. And ensure that the water is at least 2 inches above your lids to ensure a proper seal. And you can kind of hear them bouncing. Typically, you want a rack at the bottom of your canner to prevent any breakage. I did not, so wish me luck, and let's start the time. So we had 6 quarts of apple pie filling, but I went to put them in my water bath canner and I guess my jar wasn't quite warm enough because it had cracked inside the canner, so I had to dump out all the water, throw the jar away, and start over. So while we wait for this water to come up to a boil, I'm going to go over here to the apple cider. And oh, look at that. We're going to strain that off and then get that into the jar and ready for when the canner's ready. So. Okay, we got 6 quarts of apple cider, and I have an extra quart of apple pie filling I couldn't fit in the canner. So we're going to just be processing away here. Alrighty, so now I have the last batch of jars in the canner, and if you stuck around this long, congratulations, because now it's for the bonus recipe. I'm back down here in the preservation station, and I have my bowl of apple peels in the cores, and then I even have some half-gallon jars, and I even have some distilled water, and I have a bucket of sugar, because that's what we'll need to do this next recipe. And what we're going to make is some apple cider vinegar. You can use your scraps, you can use chunks of apples, anything like that, and just mix a ratio of water to sugar and just let it sit for a couple weeks, and you will get your apple cider vinegar. So it's a nice way to not waste anything. You can get, as much as you can out of the apple, from making applesauce and the filling, and then now we're gonna make cider the cider vinegar out of this. So it's really gonna help stretch what you can do with this stuff. And obviously we all know apple cider vinegar has 1,000,001 uses around the house, around the farm, around the homestead, so this is going to be very beneficial. The only thing is it's a very long process. So doing this is going to be super easy to make it, it's just you have to play the waiting game. So let's begin. First of all, I want to save some peels, and I'm going to dehydrate them because I'm going to make some potpourri and stuff. I have my orange peels and my lemon peels dehydrating right now, so they're on their way. And I'm going to save some apple peels just for the side. Not a lot, but just some. So we'll do that. And then we'll have our jar here. Now what we want to do is fill our jars up 3/4 of the way full of our scraps. Okay, so we're about 3/4 full. Now in this jar, I'm going to mix my sugar and water because you want it all fully dissolved before you add it to here. Otherwise, it might not ferment properly. Because that's what we're doing essentially, is we're fermenting our scraps, and then it'll kind of get to that alcoholic level, and then after a couple weeks, it'll start smelling like that. You strain it off, keep your liquid, and then store your liquid for another 2 weeks, and then you'll get that vinegary smell to it, and then it's ready. So for our sugar water, you want 1 tablespoon per cup of water. So that's your ratio. So we'll do 4 to see if that'll fill it up all the way. My big bucket of sugar. One, 2, 3, 4. Now the reason why I'm doing 4 and not 7 is because I know it's not going to take 7 cups of water to fill this because it's already full. So I'm guessing 4 cups should top it off. We'll be good there. And I'm using distilled water because like any tap water, any water that has chlorine or that fluoride or any sort of chemicals you don't want to be using, because those chemicals can ruin your ferment, ruin your brew, you know. So I use distilled. If you have well water or filtered water of some sort, that's safe to use as well. I prefer distilled because it's a guaranteed. So that's just me, and that's what I'm using today. Now we're gonna shake. Get that sugar nice and dissolved. Okay. Pour it in. I hope I mixed enough water. If I gotta do more, that's okay. But you want to make sure all your peels are nice and covered. And then next, I'll take my little packer, kind of just push it down a little, make sure everything's underneath. And we'll cap it. Okay, there we go. I'm not gonna keep it super tight because there will be gas buildup, and occasionally, you know, maybe once a day or a couple times a week as you walk past it, give it a little shake, maybe let some of that gas release, burp it, and then close it up and then keep it on the shelf, you know. That way it doesn't overbuild up and you don't want any breakage or any messes like that. So yeah, and that's pretty much apple cider. So it's super duper easy. You just take your scraps, put them in your jar, 3/4 of the way up. You fill it with your sugar water mixture, 1 tablespoon of sugar per cup of water. Dissolve that, then pour it over. Make sure everything's nice and covered. Put your lid on it, nice and loose, covered but loose, so the gases can escape. And then, yeah, after 2 weeks, you want to strain it off and then keep the liquid. Store that for another 2 weeks or so, and then once it's to your liking, to you know how you like your vinegar, then it's ready. Then you can just store it in cold storage and it's there for use whenever you're ready. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this apple day. It was a lot of work, it was a long day, and I appreciate you for sticking around to the end to the bonus recipe. Please give me a like on the way out, and please mention in the comments, like, if you and your family do any traditional recipes or make potpourri or anything like that. I would really love to hear more about that, because I've never done that before, and just to see what other people do and how creative people can get with it, it's really interesting. So I look forward to reading those, and please subscribe so you don't miss out on any other fun little projects we do here. So thank you for taking the time, and I hope you enjoy. Have a great day. Bye.